If you ever wondered just how strange the world has become, just imagine you're a country and you go through a horrific terrorist attack. People are murdered. They are burned to death. They are raped to death. You're mourning them, and in the middle of that, you have to start a war. You have to go after the very people that killed your people. And now you're in a public relations battle over whether or not Hamas used the Shifa Hospital as a terror hub. Now Israel is offering proof on video that Hamas was in fact using the building for holding hostages.
At the same time, talk of a possible major hostage deal is progressing. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us the latest from Jerusalem.
The Israel Defense Forces say they have proof that IDF soldier 19-year-old Corporal Noa Marciano, who was found dead in Gaza, was taken hostage alive during the massacre and held next to Shifa Hospital. Hamas is claiming that Marciano was killed by IDF bombing in Gaza, but IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hargari says that's not true.
According to the intelligence we have in our hand, a concrete intelligence, Hamas terrorists took Noa into Shifa Hospital, where she was murdered quickly.
And showed video of two other hostages.
I will now share concrete evidence of hostages. One from Nepal, one from Thailand, taken from Israel during the Hamas massacre on October 7th. After ruthlessly massacring and taking people hostage, the terrorists fled to Shifa Hospital. One of the Toyotas that used Hamas in the 7th of October are bringing hostages into the hospital.
The security camera shows the two hostages being taken into the hospital through the main entrance.
He even doesn't need a treatment, but they're taking him inside the hospital. I will now share this video that shows the same hostage entering into the hospital with a gunman, terrorist, inside the hospital.
Meanwhile, both the U.S. and Qatar indicated the sides are inching toward a hostage deal. According to press reports, at least 50 Israeli hostages would be freed in groups over a 5-day pause in the fighting.
We believe we are closer than we have been to reaching a final agreement, but that on an issue as sensitive as this and as challenging as this, the mantra that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed really does apply.
Speaking to the nation Saturday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said nothing was set.
Concerning the hostages, there are many unsubstantiated rumors, many incorrect reports. I would like to make it clear, as of now, there has been no deal. But I want to promise, when there is something to say, we will report it to you.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, the Israeli Defense Force mandates the highest standards of conduct for its soldiers of military, and it's one of the highest in the world. Yet they face international accusations that their fight against Hamas in Gaza is a genocide. 5 nations have called on the International Criminal Court to investigate Israel for possible war crimes. CBN's Dale Hurd has that story.
The International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, has warned that he's considering war crimes charges over Israel's conduct of the war and its blockade of supplies into Gaza.
I have to say that Israel has clear obligations in relation to its war with Hamas. Not just moral obligations, but legal obligations to comply with the laws of armed conflict.
The United Nations is also collecting evidence, saying Israel may be committing the crime of collective punishment with its siege.
We want the International Criminal Court to hold Netanyahu accountable for the war crimes and the crimes against humanity that Israel is committing.
First of all, nations are not charged with war crimes. Individuals are. And those charges don't come after weeks, but in most cases after many years of investigation. The International Criminal Court would also have to prove Israeli officials willfully tried to kill civilians or cause suffering. Jeffrey Korn, former U.S. Army senior advisor on law of war issues, currently leads the Center for Military Law and Policy at Texas Tech University. He says war crimes are not committed simply because civilians die, but how and why they die.
We don't define a war crime in an attack by what occurs. We define a war crime in an attack by the decision to launch the attack. So it's a conduct-based equation, not a result-based equation. And so when we look at the images of destruction and civilian suffering in war, and we jump to the conclusion that that must be a war crime, that's like saying 1 + I don't know equals war crime.
The Israeli Defense Forces Code of Ethics sets a very high bar, stating, "Every human being is of value, regardless of his or her origin, religion, nationality, gender, status, or position. The IDF servicemen and women will act in a judicious and safe manner in all they do, out of recognition of the supreme value of human life." Andrew Tucker is an expert in international law in The Hague, Netherlands.
That doesn't mean Israel doesn't make mistakes. It doesn't mean Israel doesn't do wrong things. It simply means that in terms of process, in terms of decision-making, it's, I think, indisputable that Israel holds itself to the highest moral and legal standards.
Some of those who want Israelis charged for war crimes are very upset with Karim Khan for not having already issued arrest warrants, with the anti-Israel BDS movement branding Khan a genocide enabler. But some believe it's all but assured Israelis will be charged, with so many international agencies, including the United Nations, aligned against Israel.
Most Israeli military leaders know that no matter how hard they try to actually and comply with the law and do their best to deal with this difficult situation, they're going to be condemned.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Well, joining us now from Tel Aviv is retired Colonel Richard Kemp. He was the commander of the British forces in Afghanistan, and he's a strategic consultant on terrorism, intelligence, and security. So let's get right to it. You were the commander of the British forces in Afghanistan, and the International Criminal Court tried to bring charges of war crimes against Britain. What do you think of the current situation? What are they actually trying to do?
Well, the International Criminal Court has had Israel in its sights for many years now and have attempted to launch investigations and prosecutions against Israel, so far unsuccessfully. The reality is, of course, that this is the culmination, in many ways, the culmination of a long-standing propaganda campaign against Israel that's reinforced by the ICC, by the United Nations. Given that the majorities certainly in the UN, which are aligned against Israel. So this is a political move rather than anything even remotely affecting a judicial move.
Should we look at it as an ideological move as well? The former chief prosecutor, Bensouda, she was a professing Muslim. The current one, Karim Khan, his father's Pakistani. Is there ideology driving this as well?
I don't know about the individual ideology of the people concerned, but as institutions, the ICC and also the United Nations Human Rights Council is ideologically opposed to Israel. It is certainly an ideological war. And the problem with it is that it's very dangerous because these condemnations, even if it doesn't get as far as a formal investigation or a prosecution, it's ammunition that's used by anti-Israel activists to stir up hate. It causes greater anti-Semitic attacks throughout the world. It gives Hamas justification for what they're doing. And it's part of a cycle of violence that starts with Hamas carrying out war crimes, the UN and the ICC ignoring those war crimes, and blaming Israel, falsely blaming Israel for war crimes, which then in turn causes Hamas to act again because it's playing right into the game that they're trying to play, which is to isolate and vilify and delegitimize Israel.
You've argued that the ICC actually stands against peace, that by doing these very public charges that war crimes are being committed, that it hinders the peace process. Walk us through that.
It does, and as I said, it gives ammunition to those people who want to undermine Israel's legitimacy. It prevents people from seeing the real picture of Israel. And I think one of the most perverse aspects of the way the ICC operates is that the ICC is designed to prosecute war crimes in cases where the countries themselves, the countries who allegedly carry out the war crimes, are either unwilling or unable to do so. Now, Israel has a very, very well respected, a very strong policy and tradition in its history of dealing with allegations of war crimes or any other crimes. And it's like Britain, it's like the US. We have working, long-standing, historically respected legal systems. Yet it's Britain, Israel, and the US that the International Criminal Court has frequently turned on to try and bring prosecutions for war crimes. And the reason for it is it goes back to the ideological political incentive, which is to try and make out that those countries, that some of the main, the most effective democratic countries with strong legal traditions are just as bad as those countries who don't have anything and don't have any intention of prosecuting or bringing war crimes charges. It's partly as a result of complaints by some African countries that the focus of the ICC was overwhelmingly on them, and rightly too, because the countries concerned were countries that did not have proper legal systems or the will to bring charges.
Let's talk about the current administration and, I guess, American foreign policy just over the past decade. John Kerry famously saying there can be no peace in the Middle East without a resolution to the Palestinian problem. Then you have the Abraham Accords under President Trump. During that time, Trump said that the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court wasn't welcome in the U.S. and literally imposed sanctions on the ICC. And then under the Biden administration, all of that was lifted. What could Americans do? What should American foreign policy be in response to what the ICC is currently doing?
Well, I believe the U.S. government should sanction members of the International Criminal Court if they carry out this kind of vexatious prosecution, which is very clearly intended for political purposes. And the same should apply in the United Kingdom. The U.S. is not a party to the ICC. The UK is. The UK should. I've urged the UK in the past to leave the ICC, to distance itself from the ICC and isolate the ICC, not because it does no good work. It has done good work in the past, but as I discussed just now, it's really ideologically opposed to Western democracies. In a way, it's a form of virtue signaling to the people who actually, quite rightly, are the finger is often pointed at by the ICC, and justly too. So I think the US should sanction the ICC, but I think an even bigger cause for concern than the ICC, which so far has got nowhere in its attempted prosecutions, is the United Nations Human Rights Council. And the US is a member of the UN Human Rights Council. And the UN Human Rights Council has got an obsession with Israel. It's carried out more resolutions against Israel, accusing Israel of war crimes, I think, than every other country put together. It's an international disgrace. And what the US should do there, I think, is to defund the UN Human Rights Council. It needs to be, in some way, it needs to be reformed. The reforms of the Human Rights Council have been attempted in the past, and they haven't succeeded. Successive UN Secretary Generals have acknowledged that the UN Human Rights Council is obsessed with and strongly biased against Israel, yet nothing happens. I think the time has come. And you can guarantee that once this war is ended, even probably before it's ended, we will be seeing allegations by the Human Rights Council of war crimes, unjust allegations of war crimes against Israel. So the time has come now, I think, to make a stand against the Human Rights Council.
Well, let's talk about the UN and the Security Council calling for a pause, a humanitarian pause. And I'm just amazed both the US and Britain abstained. And so the resolution went forward. So tell us from a military standpoint, what would a pause in the fighting between Israel and Hamas, what would be the downside of that?
Well, I think it's a complex issue, and you covered it in an article, one of your items just now, is the issue of hostages. And of course, there is reasonable argument to be made that if all the hostages are released, or a significant number of hostages are released by Hamas, then that could be justification enough to have a short period of ceasefire, maybe for a few days while the hostages are released. If that doesn't occur, if there is not a substantial exchange of hostages, or rather releasing of hostages, then I think there's no argument, in my view, for any form of ceasefire, because what it does, it basically is denying Israel the right to defend itself. It's denying Israel the ability to protect its citizens, because what it says is Hamas carry on, Hamas regroup, reorganize, prepare to carry out more attacks. Israel, stop defending, get back behind your borders. We're back to not quite the 7th of October, but we're into a very difficult situation again, whereas right now Hamas is under enormous pressure. It's been subjected to an extremely intensive military campaign by the IDF in the air and from the ground. And that needs to press ahead. It needs to go ahead to the destruction of Hamas. If a ceasefire occurs, we're not going to see Hamas suddenly deciding that they want to live in peace with Israel. That's very clearly out of the window. So it's just a disadvantage for Israel, unless, as I say, hostages are released in accompaniment with a ceasefire. But I think the only real ceasefire should occur either when Hamas is destroyed, or if Hamas surrender, lay down their weapons, surrender, release all the hostages. That's what the UN Security Council should be calling on Hamas to be doing. That's the purpose of the United Nations. It's not the purpose of the United Nations is not to deny a democratically elected government that is a sovereign member of the United Nations to cease defending its citizens.
Colonel Kemp, thank you so much for your insight, and keep standing with Israel. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.